There's this TikTok sound that was trending a while ago that was the music to the sound, "Oh wow, how I love to be a woman." And it would show, a little thing about how great it was to be a woman, or maybe a collage of women enjoying themselves. And before it turned sarcastic, like all positive trends do, I watched these and felt some sense of pride, some sense of comfort. The same pride that I feel like when I put on makeup and do my hair and put on a dress and look in the mirror and feel really beautiful. It made me feel like, yeah, I, for once in my life, love to be a woman. And I'm not saying you need to do these things to be a woman. There's probably something that every woman has that, like, really affirms themselves as, yes, I love being a woman. And whatever that was to you, that's what getting dressed up to me it feels like. But as these trends turned sarcastic and it showed things like, oh, how I love to be a woman because I can't walk alone at night, I still felt that comfort, you know? Not in the same way, of course, but because, like, I was being seen. Somebody understood me. Somebody understood that, yes, the world is not built for women. We are not the default. Things like movies can have male main characters for everyone, but when a woman is a main character, it's like a political statement or just for women. But, and then like stick figures. Why is a stick figure automatically a man unless we put a dress and hair on it? And those things are so trivial and like so stupid. But like I still think about it, you know what I mean? I still think about how a man is the default. I also think about men's relationship with women versus men's relationship with each other. Like a man can defend his friend as much as he wants because that man's a good guy to him. He would never do anything wrong, but ask any woman about him, he is a monster that scares them. Why do men get to walk through the world with these rose colored glasses that women don't? And this is coming from me, who is a white cis woman who presents feminine most of the time. I couldn't even imagine how it is for women of color, for trans women, for gender nonconforming women who all deal with the world in a much different way than I do, in a much more difficult way. But just life is hard. And sometimes I like that being pointed out. I like the camaraderie. I like knowing that, yeah, other people understand. Anyways, let's review Her Body and Other Parties. Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado is a collection of 9 short stories that I thoroughly enjoyed. I love the way that she's able to mix these very realistic problems with kind of like science fiction-y and fantasy elements while never having these elements stand out of place. You know what I mean? Like the world building, due to the world building, these elements just, when I read them, I'd be like, oh yeah, that happens. That's normal. I also really think she does a great job of letting us step into the narrator's shoes. All the short stories are narrated in first person by a woman with no name. The closest we get to it, I believe, is initials in The Resident. But we're also able to really empathize and like feel this character because these characters have a sense of disconnectedness with their environment. And it's not caused by the fantastical or sci-fi elements. Like it happens in stories where we follow a woman through her relationship from teenhood to her son going to college with the same man. I feel the same kind of disconnectedness and loss of control as I do in a world where there's a zombie apocalypse happening. You know what I mean? That's another thing that I really liked, is that though these stories were really dark, well, not like really dark, but had dark elements in them, there was a sense of like humor in it also. Like, we were able to laugh alongside the character. One of my like favorite ones is like in the middle of this argument, this horrible argument. The main character says, I turned on the shower and undressed and stepped inside. I'm a Cancer, a water baby always. Like, just little stuff like that is kind of funny and able to like show us it's not all misery all the time. I also really enjoy the way that gay relationships are like equally as normalized as straight ones. Like, they can be as comforting, as mundane, or even as abusive as their straight counterparts. I think this is done really well in the short story Inventory, where I will explain more about the plot of Inventory, but the relationships are held at like equal values. There are bad ones or good ones. There are just normal one-night stand relationships, either gay or straight, and I really find that refreshing almost. I don't know. Maybe I just don't see it a lot, and that's why it's so refreshing. I think my favorite short story would have to be Mother, actually, which again I will break down further when I get into that section, which is the next section where I'm going to break down all the other stories. But I love the way it plays with the nonlinear timeline, where we're slowly revealed more and more information about these characters. Past, attitudes, what happened, and characterization by not just giving it to us, but like spoon feeding it to us at the beginning. Machado does a lot of nonlinear storytelling, or like has 3 stories happening at the same time, and it never felt confusing to me. Like, I understood what was going on the entire time, and I really enjoyed this. There's also some really great and unique storytelling, which in stories like in Inventory again, Unusually Heinous, and in The Husband Stitch, where there's these really unique elements that again I will go into further, that are just really interesting. And really, like, when I was reading it, I was like, wow, I haven't really seen this before, which is really cool. Another thing about this book is I read it in 2 days. Not that impressive. It's a lot bigger than it looks because the pages are really nice and thick, but it's only 121. Yeah, 241. I don't know, I said 241 pages, and so less than 300 pages, but you don't have to like speed read it like I did. I think it's actually like a great opportunity to, like, if you're going through a slump in reading or just don't have the motivation. A lot of these stories are like 20 to 30 pages, and there's like 9 of them. There's some longer ones, there's some shorter ones, but you could just sit down and just read a story a day, like kind of get back into the swing of things in reading. And I think that's actually really awesome. And that's why I do like short stories. But if you don't want to stick around, if you haven't read it yet, because the next section I will be going into each short story individually and not just like telling what I liked about it, but my like analysis of what it meant. So I will be explaining the plot. If you don't want to hear that, the ending, you can end the video here. Just know that I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I would definitely recommend it. But if you do want to hear it and you don't mind getting a little spoiled, I think that even if you watch this whole video and you've never read the book, there's still so much you can go back and look at yourself that I would still recommend reading the book afterwards. But if you don't want to hear that, here's the end of the video for you. Thank you for watching. Now let's get into the stories. This story made me hate men a little bit after I was done. Like, I had to get up and like pace around. I was a little frustrated afterwards. But it's a great start to the book, honestly. It has this really unique storytelling that I'll get into, but I just really love the way it's structured. It goes between a linear story, which is like the main story that we're going to follow, between a woman who meets this boy when she is in her teens, to when she gets married to him when she turns 18, to their child, to this child growing up, to this child moving out. It also mixes in these like author's notes almost of like, if you're reading this out loud, make this sound so you can like really understand what's going on. Like the first line in the story is I just want to read it to you, is, if you read this story out loud, please use the following voices. Me, as a child, high-pitched, forgettable. As a woman, the same. The boy who will grow into a man that will be my spouse, robust with serendipity. My father, kind, booming, like your father, or a man you wish was your father. My son, as a child, gentle, sounding with the faintest of lisps. As a man, like my husband. All other women, interchangeable with my own. Just stuff like that is really interesting, and like it happens a lot in this story. Like this one is like, if you're reading this out loud, make the sound of the bed under the tension of the train traveling in lovemaking by straining a metal folding chairs against its hinges. When you're exhausted with that, sing a half-remembered lyrics of old songs to the person closest to you. Think of lullabies for children. Like, it's just something like I've never seen before, and I just really, really liked. I mean, I might have seen it before. I'm trying to remember. It sounds kind of familiar. But like the way she did it was just so refreshing and unique, and I really loved it. The other thing that is wound into the story is when important life events come up, the main character tells us a story of a woman who dies during these life events because they do something that isn't, like, it goes against some kind of expectation of women. All except one story, which I will get into when I talk about that specific moment. And then finally, the sci-fi element of this story is it's a take on the story of the girl with the green ribbon, which, if you don't know, it's the story of a boy who meets this girl who has a green ribbon around her neck, and he constantly asks her, sorry, I have like the hiccups. He constantly asks her to take it off, or like, what are you hiding? What's underneath? Why do you always wear it? He marries her, he dates her and marries her, and when she's on her deathbed, after bugging her, she finally takes it off and her head falls off. And it is a really interesting, like, turning the story on its head, because not only does it switch the POV to the woman, but like everyone has a ribbon. And to me, the ribbon represents something, or like the individuality or something that you are able to maintain that your husband cannot take away from you, or men cannot take away from you. Like in this story, like this man goes from not being able to touch it at all, but as he like gets closer to her, when they get married, when they have their son, he gets more and more like wanting to take this ribbon off. He tries to take it off, he touches it, things he didn't do before. And at the end, she finally, after they're finally done with their lives, well, not done with their lives, their son moved out, he went to college, she finally is like, if you want to take it off so bad, take it off. And she does, he does, and he's disappointed and he walks away, and then her head falls off. But I don't think that's important. To me, it's like men want to control every aspect a woman has in their relationship. This man says multiple times that wives shouldn't keep secrets. Sorry, that was my dog. Wives shouldn't keep secrets from their husbands, blah, 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 blah. They want to have this control. They pursue this control to take every single thing they have from you, that you have no individuality of yourself, that they're like almost conquered you. But once it's done, you're no longer an interest to them. The best part about conquering is the war before it, the fight to get to it. I also really liked how it showed boy's evolution to man through her son. So she has one child because after the child is born, she cannot have other children. But when she's having this child, she's having a little difficulty birthing him. And doctor's like, well, we're gonna have to cut you open. She does not want this to happen because she does not want the last minute she has being one with her son, being one with her child, to be ripped away. And this is the time that the only like story that isn't really negative, like someone doesn't die in it, happens. And well, people die in it, but it's basically this girl whose parents died, who gets raised by wolves. She gets seen a couple times. She's wild, she's free, she's running around. She's seen nursing these 2 wolf cubs that our narrator says she thinks is her own. And it's her own. She doesn't care how painful it is. She doesn't care because it's her own. And yeah, I really think that relates to her child being her own until he becomes a man, which can also be seen in the way he treats the green ribbon around her neck. When he's a young child and as a baby, she doesn't feel like worried when he like touches it or grabs her because he sees it as part of her. It's not like an extension, it's her. Until one day when her husband tries to rip it off, he sees this happening and he asks her about it, and he asks her what's the green ribbon for, and he finally sees it as not part of her. This autonomy, this individuality is not part of his mother anymore. It is just an accessory. And he learns this from his father. And at this point, their relationship will never be the same. There's like so much more to the story. Like I could do a whole video about just the analysis of this short story alone, but I will spare you. Go read it. Find out what you like. Take what you will from this story, like what you think it's about. Yeah. This story I actually read in my creative writing workshop class, and it's like why I decided to read this book. I had actually already bought this book, probably because somebody on TikTok said to buy it. And then we read a story of it in class. We read inventory. I was like, I really like this. So I decided to read the book. But inventory is set up in a way that our main character is explaining every single person she has slept with, from the first to the last. And it's just sometimes it's long paragraphs, sometimes it's short paragraphs, sometimes it's one night stands. One of them is her wife that she's only married to for a year. While this is going on in the background, we are slowly learning there's this disease that's turning people, I think, into it's like a zombie disease. That slowly in the background, while she's explaining this, a zombie apocalypse is going down. And this is like written before 2020, but the way that it explains it in such a nonchalant way, like, okay, California is completely like being quarantined, people are still going about their day, but like the economy slowly gets worse and worse, obviously, until it like devolves into an apocalyptic situation. But like this is happening and people just don't seem to care until somebody they know is affected. And it feels very timely. Reading it now after what we've seen, I do think it's very realistic of how the world would almost relate to a zombie apocalypse. Just this like not caring until it was like this huge serious problem. It just feels very realistic instead of like a zombie apocalypse media where like things turn to shit right away. I like the slow, gradual change. And it just feels perfectly normal with this backing of something as normal as sleeping with somebody. I just really love the connection between the two. And the great thing is, like, at the end, she is infected. She is on this island. That's the last entry. And she's saying she's sitting there taking inventory of things in her life in her head. And this is obviously like one of those inventory things. And I think that was really interesting. My favorite part of the story, though, is when she's sleeping with, I think, this scientist who's like, they're laying in bed afterwards and she's explaining like it's being spread through touch as long as if only people would stop touching each other while they're laying in bed after just having slept with each other. And I think that's really great because like people crave this human connection more than anything and will refuse to be quarantined. Also really funny, but it's better to die in the arms of another person than it is to live completely alone, because what are we without human connection? And I really like that. I think this is my favorite story in the entire book. I cannot perfectly analyze everything, but god damn it, did I try. Mother is a story that follows 3 timelines. One, where our narrator gets this newborn baby from this character called Bad, and this character says, I gave birth to her, she's yours. And next is following her and Bad's relationship before this moment happened. And this third is following that what this baby could be. Like, this could be their relationship. This could be the baby they talked about that they wanted to have, named Mara, I believe. Yeah, Mara. They could have this happy relationship. To me, this baby represents the toxic relationship, this abusive relationship itself. And there's like a couple hints at this. One of them being this baby, like when she first gets it, is very calm, doesn't need anything, doesn't cry, just looks at her. But then it just starts to bawl and bawl and bawl. But one of these lines I think really captures it for me is then this, like, it after the screaming stops and she's calm for a little bit, the babies fall asleep, but then the screaming begins again. But I can endure it because in that precious moment, that break, my tolerance is fresh again, my love is renewed. And it shows really that, like, you can put up with abuse as long as there's good things also happening in the relationship, which I feel like follows this baby could be our daughter, and we could have this perfect life as long as I just put up with this crying for a little longer. If I just, I just deal with this for just a little longer, I could have this perfect relationship. We have all these great times. I think also that's the importance of Bad birthing the baby and the narrator getting the baby and then Bad abandoning her. It's Bad's created this toxicity, created the abuse, but now after she left, our narrator is still stuck with it. She didn't make it. It isn't her problem, but she's stuck with this abuse and she doesn't know what to do with it. And at the same time, she constantly says stuff like, I can't put the baby down. I don't want anything bad to happen to it. I can't put the baby down, which is like, I can't let go of this relationship because it could be something great, as it is in the third story. I mean, the third, like, timeline almost. There are some parts I just don't fully understand. If you read it, you probably will understand because I didn't mention them. But I don't think it takes away from my analysis at all. I think I did a good job now analyzing it. But if you go read the story, or if you've already read the story, tell me what you think. Tell me what the ending, like where the people come in the house, means. I kind of might get it, but please tell me what you think. I have not seen an episode of Law & Order SVU in like maybe 8 years, where I would like watch it like when no one else was home in my house. But like, I was never really into it. I would just watch random episodes. So I didn't think I was going to get a lot out of the story because it's just a collection of every single episode, like 271 episodes of Law & Order SVU, and saying like the most memorable part of them. And at first I'm like, okay, I don't care, like, great. But the way she sets up these stories, she really focuses on 2 characters, Benson and Stabler, I believe. And the way she, like, just reading these short excerpts of every single episode, you just feel like it's a linear story. It's really interesting, and I think it was actually really probably hard to do. It's just finding some connection between each of these episodes and creating this like long linear story between them. I think that's great, and I don't think you should skip this story. I don't have a lot to say about it. I don't have a lot analysis about it, but I don't think you should skip it. Also, if you have seen Law & Order SVU, like all the episodes, there are ghosts in it? What? Because there's ghosts in this. I don't and I didn't understand. Well, I understood in the story, but I didn't understand the context of this show. So, please let me know. This is not what this story was gonna like. What this story is about is not what I thought it was gonna be about, based on the title alone. But it's basically about this our narrator who works in this like really expensive prom dress store where like, you know, only rich girls can come get these prom dresses. And one day she goes and she sleeps with the delivery girl who mother makes a majority of these dresses. And they go to the motel that this mother like runs, and they get a room, and afterwards this girl Petra shows her that the back of the motel, these her mother making the dresses. I completely forgot to explain the entire supernatural plot of this story. But in the story, there's this disease going around that only affects women where they begin to vanish. Like it starts off slowly, they begin to become see-through, and eventually they're like this ghost that can get stuck into things that like it floats around. They don't know if they're dead or have thoughts or are still a person, but it's just this problem that is only affecting women. And they go into this back room and they see these dresses being made, and they see these women are being sewn into the dresses. Like they come voluntarily and want to be sewn into these dresses. And our narrator freaks out, quits her job, moves into this motel with Petra. They start this relationship, and after a while Petra begins to fade or vanish. And I think this is where the story is actually the strongest, is the relationship between our narrator and Petra, and like just the intimacy. Again, that human connection matters so much in like these apocalyptic situations. And I think their relationship is really beautiful and is written really, really well. But eventually Petra fades completely. Our narrator begins to fade herself, and she goes back to the store with scissors and cuts the dresses up, and like it's like, please, like to the women, you're free, go out the door, you're free, you're no longer trapped in these dresses. And they don't want to leave. I think my analysis is pretty simple of this. I believe it's commentary on women's like need to feel beautiful and like desired even after they lose this beauty. Like they're physically not invisible. It's like weird how they describe it, but they're like spirits. They're no longer seen. So they attach themselves to these beautiful garments so they are still beautiful. And this, I also think it's a commentary on materialism, because they're like stuck into these material items. They are still wanted through these material items, even if they have themselves lost their beauty. But again, I feel like the story is the strongest on the humans and their connections with one another. I really do like the contrast between how the men in the story and the women in the story, where the men are like don't have to worry because only women are vanishing. Like the two main characters in the story talk about like how they wouldn't want to have sex with a vanished woman because like there's nothing to grab onto, or these women have to like worry constantly that one day that they could start vanishing too, that they could lose what's like what society sees as important. So yeah, one day they'll just be gone. In a time of buccal fat removal and preventative Botox at 20, 8 Bites seems very, very timely. It's a story about a woman with an adult daughter that's around her age. That's all we giving about her age. Who have 3 sisters who have all undergone the new like hit surgery. And the surgery is a gastrectomy, or like they remove half of their stomach so they can't eat as much so they can lose weight, which is like an actual surgery, I know, but they usually only give it to people who are extremely like obese and like are at health risk. But they're just, you know, handing it out now. As long as you pass the psychological test, you can be as skinny as you want. after the surgery, our narrator begins to feel this like presence in this house, and she calls her sisters, and they all say like, yeah, that's just like that was my happiness, that was my like self-doubt going away, that was my blah 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 blah. So the narrator's like, okay, this is just normal, whatever. And then one day she hunts it down and she starts kicking it, she beats up, and she finally feels happy. But she gets this vision of her being 75. She's dying that day, like she's about to die. And it's the day her daughter is coming with her daughter. And the importance is that this vision comes back to haunt her one last time. And she realizes this like this presence will outlast her and it'll be immortal. And I think it's the representation of losing yourself to impossible beauty standards. And I really believe this story is about how girls will learn how to feel about their own bodies based on how their mother feels about her body. In the story, the main character's mother has this philosophy that you need 8 bites. And that's all you need to understand, like get a sense of the food. And our narrator could never do that. She's upset because she was never a fat child. She was never a fat teenager. But after she had her daughter, Cal, she gained weight, like any normal person would. But she's surrounded by this mother who had 4 daughters and was skinny because she only had to take 8 bites of food. And now she's surrounded by her sisters who all had this surgery. So she finally gives in to have this surgery. And it's just horrible. And it's also really interesting in also a culture of like, it also is interesting when we compare this mother-daughter relationship between Cal and our narrator and one of her sisters and our narrator's niece, where the sister was so happy when her mother had the surgery. She sent her flowers. She was so proud of her for having the surgery, where Cal, the narrator calls her up and Cal's like, what are you doing? Like, I'm so upset about this. And then they later have a phone call where Cal says, do you hate my body too? Because they have the same body type. And mother's like upset that she would even ask that. She hangs up on her. But you can tell your kid all you want. You can tell your daughter all you want that you're beautiful, like you're beautiful at any size, it doesn't matter. But if you turn around and hate your body and constantly talk about hating your body and imposes diet culture on your daughter, she's not going to feel good about herself either. And I think like when we talk about like almond moms, this is what it is. It's the cycle of putting your body image of yourself onto your daughter. And I think that's why this presence is immortal, because as long as you hate your body, we don't know if Cal might have gotten the surgery and is posing the same beauty standard onto her daughter, or she might have broken the cycle. But this hatred, this like losing yourself to a beauty standard, will go on through generation unless you break it. Unless you love yourself, your daughter will never be able to love herself. And yeah, I think that's what the story is about. The Iowa model is a writer's workshop technique where the writer will present their work and will have to be silent while their peers, other writers, will critique it by saying what they like and what they dislike about it, or how we did it in my class, to stay and possible futures. And as I've been through this creative writing workshop class now, I agree with my teacher that is much more helpful for the critics than it is for the writer, especially if you're writing about something that is extremely personal to you that the critics have absolutely nothing to say about. Like, they don't understand at all. Having to sit in silence while I listen to a man who's never experienced bipolar disorder discuss how my portrayal of a character's manic episode was childish and unrealistic is extremely frustrating, because why should I take it from him? I know what a manic episode is. What I wrote is realistic. Why should I listen to him? And I think I believe that's what an important part of The Resident is. The Resident is one of the longer stories. It's like 50-ish pages. I'm not going to explain the entire thing. But basically, our narrator is a writer, and she gets invited to this artist's retreat where she goes up into this mountain, and these artists can work on their projects completely isolated from society and like live together as artists or whatever. And it's funny because it's at actually the same place that she used to go to camp as a Girl Scout. And there's a lot to go about that. The story is the linear story between her at this workshop or this retreat and like flashbacks of her as a Girl Scout. But there's a lot, again, to talk about in this story. That go read it, go tell me what you think is important. But I really think is important is like almost making fun of how an artist is supposed to act, or an artist is supposed to like perform, that their art is the most important thing on the planet, even if it's like at somebody else's detriment. And I think this is explained when this photographer takes a picture of every single artist that she's friends with falling out of a chair and them on the ground, and takes this photo of them. And the narrator like had such a great time doing this, and she felt some kind of like friendship between this photographer, but then sees her photo and sees herself exposed in a way she doesn't want other people to see her. She sees this nothingness in her eyes and feels completely betrayed by this person she thought was her friend. But the photographer doesn't care. She created art that she thinks is good, and that's all that matters. My favorite part of this story, which I feel like really accentuates making fun of these workshop techniques and these writers' retreats and artist retreats, is after our narrator shows a small part of her story. And she writes, and you can tell she writes this character very much the way she sees herself. And after she writes it, this musician who she doesn't like throughout the entire retreat says, well, do you think you're going to become the mad woman in the attic? Because if you write like crazy characters, you're going to become crazy. And don't you think like the mad lesbian is a harmful stereotype? I'm not a lesbian though. And our narrator, who is married to a woman, it's like the character is not crazy. Like she just has issues with like communication and stuff like that. And the character's like, I never met somebody like that. And the narrator's like, this character is me. But like, why should our narrator have to listen to this musician talk about stuff she has no clue about? Like, why would the narrator like take that as valid criticism? And why does this musician have a space to critique this work she understands absolutely nothing about? It's just really interesting to me, and I did enjoy this part. There's a lot of other things to say about the artist world. I know there's stuff to analyze about making fun of gothic horror characters and tropes like that, but I'm not going to talk about that in this video. Go read it. Tell me what you think. I know I keep saying that, but there's so much. You should just go read the book. Okay, so this is our last story in the book, and it follows a woman trying to be comfortable again with being intimate with her boyfriend after being harassed and assaulted in her own home. And she does this by watching dirty videos and dirty movies. I don't know if YouTube will let me say the other word. I don't know how much YouTube will let me say a lot of this, but whatever. The title comes from a moment where she goes to this housewarming party, and her boyfriend's friends, and he's like, come, like she doesn't want to go, but she's like, it'll be mainly women because it's a two-woman couple, but the couple is of two women. They have a lot of women friends. Just come. But this time, like, there's this guy walking around with the camera and kind of is like recording her. And at the end of the night, she gets really drunk and takes the camera home. And at the end of the story, when she's finally able to be intimate again with him, she records it, watches it back, and finally can watch this video with feeling a sense of ease that she did it. She has overcome this feeling. But I think it's interesting because you could read this story as this really triumphant, like, getting control of your body back, but also reading it as she's doing this for her boyfriend, and a woman's role to need to understand, like, be so determined to overcome these obstacles because otherwise their boyfriend will leave them. And I think it could be a mix of both. And like the lines are blurred because she talks about how great her boyfriend is, but at the same time, she talks about not wanting to upset him a lot. She talks about when they're at this party, she sees him with talking to this woman who keeps like touching his arm, and she gets very upset by this. So I think you can read it as a mix of both, but it's interesting to like see how women are pushed to get over things quicker because of the people around them. That's really, it's a simple really analysis about it. I don't think there's much. I understand like the symbolism of the camera, of being watched, but there's a lot of stuff that I didn't 100% understand about this story. I would go read it. I don't have a lot of firsthand experience with what this story is about too, so I don't want to like overshare like this is what I think it's about and blah 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 and I'm right, you know what I mean? But that's what I think. Thank you for watching this video if you did, and if you haven't already, please read Her Body and Other Parties. Even if you've listened to me describe the plot of these stories, there's still so much to take from this book, and I would definitely read it if you can. If you have read it or you're going to read it, tell me your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what you analyzed, your analysis of these stories is. Tell me your favorite story. Yeah, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.